Under 940 CMR 29.10, Section 5, Dean Charter will be participating remotely during the meeting due to a geographic distance greater than 20 miles via audio conference. Please note that a quorum is physically present. A roll call vote is required for any and all votes involving members participating remotely. Mr. Benson will call the roll.
Mr. Martin? Aye. Mr. Berry? Aye. Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Should I do it again? Okay, let me do it again. Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Berry?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Benson? Aye.
Motion carries.
And Mr. Charter?
Aye.
All right, the purpose of this meeting is to discuss Article 3 on the sewers for West Acton. I'll turn it over to David.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good day. Specifically, this meeting is to discuss a proposal to phase the sewer project or to pass the sewer project in two phases. The sewer project has always had these two phases. We always planned to build an initial phase to support the school, which has to go up Mass Ave, and the main force main has to go up Mass Ave and over Spruce Street early in order to be there in time to support the school when it needs everything in place to begin construction. Phase 2 phase 1 has only that one connection. Phase 2 connects all other West Acton Village properties that are in the district. This proposal is to divide the project into two articles, one this year and one next year. Why are we delaying phase 2? The biggest reason is that by far and away, the biggest feedback we've had on the project is about the cost impact to the property owners in the district. That there's been more feedback on that than all other areas of feedback combined. The delay of phase 2 gives the sewer committee time to figure out what we might do. While doing phase 1 now allows us to support the school, to support more flexible property use at the school without having a leach field on site, and it connects a very large discharge customer in the school in West Acton. It also allows us to get started on the project. Because delays in the project always have rising costs. You know, the cost for construction go up faster than the cost of inflation. What would we do with this delay? So the possible ways that we can address the feedback for the high cost is to apply again for grants, especially mass work grants. We could, the sewer committee could choose to increase the project area. We toyed with that idea in September, but we didn't really have time to flesh it out before this fall's town meeting. The bigger project area reduces the betterments, individual betterments for all. We could improve betterment payment options, and this whole reevaluation and phasing started with one member of FinCom suggesting that we might have different payment options on betterments. And we investigated these, and that original suggestion might not work out exactly, but there are variations of that might, and we need to investigate, you know, what's legal under Massachusetts law and what makes sense for the people in the district. And finally, we could consider a general revenue contribution to the project. We're the only town in the Commonwealth to not support our sewers at all out of general revenues, and we could choose to change that. One of the things that's been pointed out, especially by one member of the public, but it really hits home with me, is the way our current bylaws are. It pits one district against the other, right? And I put the et cetera on this line because I've heard innumerable variations of, well, if you do that for them, then that's going to cost me more. And in general, those things that people ask are not true. We've tried to divide the cost completely fairly so that they, according to bylaw, they only cover the district where they're incurred. But people are always concerned about them, right? And it's, I mean, I'm not belittling that concern in the least bit, but I think that concern comes out of the way we've chosen to finance our sewers. For other projects, we act as a community, right? The other two projects that are on this fall town meeting mostly benefit particular constituencies in town, but we act as a community to make them happen. So, phase one financials, and this is to build this complete picture, I need to go through to the end of the presentation, so things will become clear over time. Phase one is $1.9 million as we're proposing it, about an eighth of the original sewer project. Out of that, $800,000 is general benefits of the same kind that were in the original project. $600,000 would come from avoided costs from the school, and $500,000 would be risked by the town. And I'm going to come back to that as to whether that's a real risk or not. So there are kind of four scenarios here, and again, bear with me through this project. There's the four scenarios is we have two possible votes on these two phases. So neither can pass, both can pass, or one can pass. And so I'm going to try to go through what happens in each stage, and hopefully it makes sense to everybody. So if phase one passes at this town meeting, first of all, the motion will be contingent on the school. And so if the school chooses not to want to hook to the sewers, we will not go forward with phase one, and it'll be as if phase one didn't pass. Phase one will put a force main down Mass Ave and Spruce Street to connect to the school. We'll be done with the construction by August 1st. This main pipe is the force main, I'll call it a high pressure main, is not suitable for individual connection. It's suitable for large pumping stations. And I'm going to come back to that a little bit at the end of the presentation as well. We would then plan to vote for phase two in a special town meeting next year. And this is an important point that there are no betterments for this phase. Both phases are the same project, right? And so until the project ends, there are no betterments. Betterments happen after the end of the project when all the costs are known. And just for an example, in the South Acton project, there were 3 article votes over 2 years for one project and one betterment. So I'm going to say that again because a lot of people have asked whether we have to better this, better phase one. We don't have to better phase one unless phase two doesn't happen, and I'll talk about that in a second. And again, in South Acton, there were 3 article votes over 2 years, one project, one betterment. If phase one fails at this town meeting, we can't support the school on the sewer system, and we'll just go forward with the phase two vote in 2020 special town meeting. That, in that case, the phase two will be the project. Whether phase one passes or not, the sewer committee voted last night to pursue changes to the sewer bylaws to allow more flexibility to reduce betterments. And so we'd like to propose that we change the sewer bylaws to allow general revenue contributions. So that's something that we will bring up next year at the annual town meeting. At least that's our plan. It's obviously, the sewer committee has to recommend to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen has to agree for that to be on the warrant next year. That does not, there's no way, in no way does whether those things pass influence phase one at all. What it does influence is how much we can lessen the cost to residents in phase two. If Phase 2 passes next year, we'll be providing a connection for all of the other West Acton Village properties, just as if we, as we originally planned. And in that case, Phase 1 and Phase 2 become the project. So this slide applies whether or not Phase 1 happened, right? So if Phase 1 fails and Phase 2 passes, this slide still applies. And the betterments are for the entire project, as I said before. So the betterments will be for Phase 1 plus Phase 2. If Phase 2 passes, these are the financials that we've been talking about. And they're, at the bottom I say here, the details will be next year, because we could change the parameters of Phase 2 between now and then. For example, I said earlier that we could make the project area bigger, in which case it would make the total sewer project bigger, but each betterment smaller. But this is gives you a general idea. Actually, I should have noted that second bullet here there from the school only applies if also Phase 1 went through. So I will make a change to that in my slide. If Phase 2 fails next year, then the entire project is just Phase 1 if it passes, right? So again, I was going back to what I said before. We could have both phases, neither phase, or either phase. And so this would be the case if Phase 1 passes on Tuesday, but town meeting chooses not to move ahead with Phase 2 next year. In that case, the betterments are just for Phase 1. We would close the project and better the people along Mass Ave and Spruce Street. We would incorporate bigger businesses into the project and considering incorporating others. And we'd have an abatement process for others who can't connect. The abatement process exists today, and we don't need any bylaw changes to do that. So, as I said in the beginning, the force main that we put in Phase 1 isn't really intended to have individual connections. We could change the philosophy of it and make it available for individual connections, and there's some technical things there that I think are too much to discuss here. But we could potentially hook up everybody, or we could just potentially hook up the big businesses. That last bullet on the bottom just says that the abatement process could be made easier with a bylaw tweak, saying, for example, that people who are on a force main are actually not bettered, for example. That would be one way. But it's not required to do this. We can abate anybody who actually can't connect, and that's the purpose of the abatement process. So coming back to this slide that I had towards the beginning, if Phase 2 fails and we just have Phase 1, these are basically the financials that we'd be dealing with. And these numbers, especially towards the bottom, bounce around a little bit depending on who gets bettered and things like that. But there is really very minimal risk to the town. And in fact, if we choose to transform that force main into a low pressure sewer main, actually the betterments are quite low to the people along those two streets, Mass Ave and Spruce Street. About 2/3 of the betterments, the cost that we have here. But those would be all low pressure sewers in that case. So we have a few decisions to make. The point of this slide is that there's minimal risk to the town by proceeding with Phase 1. So the question in front of the board today is whether next week we move for the entire project, move just for Phase 1, which is what the sewer committee recommended last night, or take no action now. I will say that for me personally, I would find it a little awkward to go for the whole project now. There are the couple issues that I mentioned in the beginning about the cost to homeowners or property owners, and the fact that our current sewer bylaws pit groups against each other. I think both those things are not good, and I would rather fix them, or try to fix them anyway, before moving forward. But I obviously will go with whatever the board decides to do here. But at the end of any questions that anybody might have, I'd like to move that we put Phase 1 on as the motion on Article 3 next week. Happy to take any questions.
On that last slide.
Your microphone, Peter.
Okay, on the last slide, if phase 2 fails, financials. So you got $500,000 from Village Works. You're talking about, can you make it accessible to the businesses and the property owners? You're talking about a low pressure versus high pressure? Is that, you build the same pipe, but you can either make it low pressure or high pressure?
So Village Works would rather, the answer is yes. Village Works would rather wait till Phase 2 and hook up like normal. But Village Works is a pretty big place, and they do pump, and they could connect to the big main. That would work. We could also, as you say, with the same pipe, transform that into a low-pressure sewer and hook up everybody along the route. So we have a choice to make later.
Okay, you could do that even after the schools, suppose the school's hooked up, you could still transform
that's
and
right.
lower the betterments for the people that along that line.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
I used to have comments when we take comments from the board members.
My understanding from last night's meeting is Phase 1 would be the high pressure and Phase 2 would be the low pressure.
So Phase 2 in part, so if we go forward with both and both pass, Phase 2 provides gravity sewers to most people and low pressure sewers just for the properties that are kind of towards Charter Road. So, but you're right in that the project has always planned to have 2 pipes down Mass Ave at any point. One is the force main coming from the center of West Acton, and the other is either a low pressure main or a gravity main, depending on where you are on Mass Ave.
So both pipes would run down 111?
That's correct. And that's, again, always been the plan. That's not changed by this plan at all.
But it is possible to change the high pressure to low pressure?
Only if we do not go forward with Phase 2, right? And because Phase 2 brings the other pumping stations in West Acton, and that we need the high pressure main. So in this situation, where if Phase 2 fails, the high pressure main could become low pressure if that's what we consider to be advantageous.
Okay.
Does Dean have any questions? Or?
Dean, did you hear that?
I could not hear the last comment.
He was just asking if you had any questions.
Oh, no questions.
Questions from the audience? I'm asking if there are any questions from the audience.
Lauren Rosenzweig Morton, 26 Marshall Path. Do you mean just questions for now, or do you mean comments too?
Questions?
Okay.
Christy Anderson, Main Street. If Phase 1 happens, would the town buy into the wastewater treatment plant similar as would happen with the whole project right now?
Yes, there is a small buy-in for Phase 1 as part of that 1.9 million.
And in Phase 2, there was a $2 million additional benefit to the town. Is that from anything other than the library and the fire station?
Yes, in fact, the biggest areas of that are paving and police details.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
Hi, Al Bludgenik, Heather Hill Road. As far as the general benefit to the town, the $800,000 for this, if Phase 2 were to go through, how much is the additional for that? Or is this just all from the whole project is going to be lumped into this Phase 1 if Phase 2 weren't to pass?
So depending on exactly what we propose for Phase 2, this could change, but mostly that gets subtracted from the amount that we would have paid otherwise. Because again, the difference here is not that we're doing the phases. The difference is that we're passing the phases in 2 different articles in 2 different years. So the project is really, the combined project is really the same as we have been talking about. We've had the detail available for, some months now, 4 or 5 months. So it's really it's the same, it's just when we choose to pass the articles to do them.
And then if Phase 2 does not pass, is that something that's going to be pursued year after year after year since we already have pipework laid down there?
So I can only speak for me, and we could ask the other members of the board. And I mentioned this actually last night at the sewer committee meeting. I personally find it distasteful to come back with the same article again, and I would not vote to do that. The only way I would vote is if we change something. So for example, let's suppose Phase 1 passes and Phase 2 does not pass. We could come back with a smaller project that just served the businesses in the core of West Acton, for example. But that's different than the currently proposed. For me, I would not vote to come back with the same Phase 2 article again in 2021 and 2022.
Right.
There would have to be some difference for me to support it.
As far as the bylaw changes go, it's been explained to me, although I cannot validate this or not, that Littleton is working on a project where they have a tie-in betterment. So you're not charged a betterment until you tie in. Whether that's accurate or not, I don't know, but it has been presented. Are we able to change the bylaws for us to do the exact same thing?
So that was one of my bullets. The third bullet there. And part of this delay is to give us time to research those options, right?
But is that the hindrance? Is it the existing bylaw that's a hindrance, or is there a Massachusetts state law that prohibits us?
I don't think the Massachusetts state law prevents us from doing anything there, but we need it needs more investigation. So that's exactly the reason for the delay. I can't answer exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy Waters, 622 Mass Ave. I arrived late, so I apologize if this has already been answered. The rationales, the needs that this project are supposed to be serving have shifted somewhat over time. What is the compelling need for this rationale or need, mission of this project at this time? Thank you.
So some of those answers are on the slide I just switched to, which and the reason for doing this is to give us time to evaluate the 4 options to manage the costs and betterments better for the property owners in the district, and serve the school and get started on the project at the same time.
I'm sorry, my question wasn't clear enough. I'm not asking what the rationale is for this change or this amendment. I'm asking what the rationale is for a sewer in that neighborhood if the school has said it doesn't matter.
So the rationale for the sewer is to support the businesses in West Acton and protect the environment in West Acton.
So then I will still need to give a presentation, a rebuttal presentation on Tuesday night, in which we have compelling evidence that those rationales are not true. Thank you.
Peter?
I do have one other question. I don't think it's accurate that the school said it doesn't matter. That's not true. I'm on the school building committee. The schools have not made a decision yet about what to do because they wanted to see what happened at town meeting. I believe it's the school building committee that makes that decision. Right now, the project is approved by the state Mass School Building Association includes a septic because we had to design a wastewater treatment for the project, so that went into the state. Assuming it's a school building committee, it might be the school committee, I'm not sure. I think it's a school building committee. That decision would be made after town meeting. What happens if the schools decide not to connect up? Would the project not be built at all? Would phase one not be built at all?
Yes, that's right. So the project, I think I said that on one of these slides. I'd have to go find it. But if the school decides not to hook up, we would not proceed with phase one, even if it passes. So the motion for next Tuesday, if this is the way we decide to go, would be contingent on the school hooking up. And if they decide no, then we would just not bother with phase one and go right to phase two.
Mike?
Mike Majors, Freedom Farm Road. Just a general question. Assuming it's generic to delaying phase two, since time is money, that's going to affect the project cost. What would be the inflation multiplier for a delay of 1 year, 2 year, 5 years that need to go into the project assumptions?
So, Mike, I don't know the inflation multiplier long-term for construction costs. That might be something that we need to look into. But one of the reasons to get going with the project is if we passed phase two next year, there would be minimal delay and minimal increase in cost.
Again, I am Nancy Waters at 622 Mass Ave. I specifically asked John Peterson and Mary Brolin what the school building committee's position on this was and what they will say when they are asked during the warrant 1 question and answer section. And they said they are completely neutral on this, which I believe is to their benefit because they do not want the anger about warrant 3 spilling over into warrant 1, which is happening. Not by me. I'm staying away from that, but it's happening. If you go online today, you will see it. What was my next question? Oh, relative to the school and the sewer. The part of the sewer that the town will be paying for, supposedly for which the rationale is to help the school is in the school district that comprises Acton and Boxborough. If this has a benefit for Boxborough residents, will they not be asked to chip in for this? Thank you.
So Boxborough residents do chip in for this. But, Boxborough pays, what, 15% of the construction costs of the new school? So 15% of 600,000, or whatever the number turns out to be.
John?
Yeah, I have a question, David. If Phase 1 is approved by the town, that would be the twin school hookup. The bylaw D10, that's a sewer assessment bylaw, provision 2A, titled Assessment by Uniform Unit Method. The town, acting through its sewer commissioners, which would be the selectmen, shall assess the owners of all land abutting any way in which there is a public sewer line constructed by the town by the uniform unit method as authorized by GLC 85, Section 16. Now, by my clear reading of that, there's the strong adverb shall. So the pipe goes down, the businesses along Main Street or Mass Ave would be assessed. As it turns up Central Street, those homes would be assessed. If it worked its way Arlington and Spruce Street to Gates, all of those properties would receive a betterment assessment. Now, if Phase 2 should fail, wouldn't that create risk to those homeowners if Article 1, if Phase 1 passes, Phase 2 doesn't pass? They would be assessed some rather whopping assessments. Now, I understand they can apply for abatements if for topography or other reasons they can't hook into the system. But I think we're leaving a lot of people very vulnerable in this process. If Phase 1 passes and Phase 2 doesn't pass, what would be your response to that?
So actually, the betterments there would be much lower than the betterments that are for the entire district today, if we did them low-pressure sewers, right? So they'd be about $22,000 a house along Mass Ave.
How much?
$22,000.
So the betterments would be $22,000 a house.
Right, and if we didn't allow them to hook up, we'd abate them. Right, I'd have to, I'm pretty sure that's the number, and I'll confirm that, but I'm pretty sure that's the number.
But they are, but because the sewer line goes down, they're facing abatements, whether it's
They're facing betterments.
Betterment, where they have a forced main pipe or whatever you want to call it. It's the key word is the sewer line that goes down. Once the line goes down, that triggers the assessment.
Once the project completes, that triggers the assessment.
Well, it triggers it, but the betterment isn't formally assessed with the amount that you actually have to pay until the project is completed. So if Phase 2 goes down, the cost of Phase 1 is shared by a smaller group of people, not by a larger group of people.
But also the cost for Phase 1 per house are less than the cost for Phase 2. There are no town-built pumping stations, for example. The cost is actually less for those people, not more.
Even if they can't connect?
If they can't connect, we'd abate them. And there's a couple ways that we could make that process easier or automatic if we choose to do that.
Peter?
Yeah, no, I just want to, for people's information, the Board of Selectmen are the sewer commissioners for the town, and abatement under the current bylaw would take a vote of the Board of Commissioners, of the Board of Selectmen. That's my understanding.
That's correct.
So you can't say we would abate them. It takes a vote. I mean, I think they'd have a very good argument, but it actually would take a vote.
Right. If the sewer is not actually available to them because of a high pressure pipe, we also can, as I mentioned, look into one of two things, or even both of two things. One is making the abatement process more automatic in that case, or not bettering people in the first place if the pipe that goes through the street in front of their house is not suitable for hooking up.
Well, that couldn't be done by regulation, wouldn't it? It would take a change in the bylaw.
That would make a change in the bylaw, and I mentioned that.
Yes.
John Roars, 198 Arlington Street. What's your opinion of the reasonableness of asking the town at the last minute to vote on something that so radically differs from the scheme that's been proposed and published in the warrant. And please note, this is a question about democratic fairness, not parliamentary rules. Thanks.
What's being proposed here is just a subset of what was originally in the plan. I wouldn't call that radically different. The timing is different, but it's a subset. It's always what we always planned this phase, and it was always part of the project.
What's missing is the funding mechanism for the second part is then up in the air. Thank you.
Nancy Waters, 622 Mass Ave. This is about abatements. My understanding, and I did not bring the piece of Chapter 80 that relates to abatements, but my understanding, I wish town council were here, is that the abatement process is strictly controlled by the state, in that it is illegal to suggest even that anyone will get an abatement prior to the completion of the project, the assessment of betterments, and an abatement application and hearing process. Thank you.
So there are a couple of things that can be done there. You're absolutely right that you can't abate until you've been bettered, and you can't better until you've finished the project, right? So the betterments are years in the future, and those betterments would, and the abatement process would use the then current bylaws. So if we choose to change the bylaws between now and then, the new bylaws apply.
Jason Cole, Neshoba Road. Question about the proposed phase one. What's the number of properties that are, I believe the overall project is something like 200 properties. What's the number of properties that are going to be impacted by phase one? And how is it that phase one, the betterments per property are so much less than phase two? If you have less people in the pool, how do you get less cost per property?
Well, to answer your second question first, one of the reasons that it's less is that, this is a situation that we would not, not having phase two is not a situation that we would advocate, right? So we would want to do phase two. If we don't do phase two, we're forced into the situation of closing the project. In that case, we may choose to put everybody on low-pressure sewers, which are much less expensive than gravity sewers. You don't have to dig as deep. It's much simpler. And there are also a few big customers on this route, which lower the cost. And your first question was?
How many properties are impacted by phase one?
Is Paul still here? I think that there are 18 properties on Mass Ave, and I'm not sure the exact number on Spruce.
So the fact that the school is tying in is what's actually lowering the assessment for the betterment for each property, because it's such a large, in that environment, it's such a large fish in that pond.
Plus Village Works. But we should be clear that only happens if we don't do anything following, right? Right,
Understood.
We're not proposing, it's not the ideal situation to have phase one be a standalone project.
Understood.
Alyssa Nichols, 76 School Street. I have a follow-up question about the Boxborough portion of this project. It was 15%, you said?
Maybe the superintendent can answer. I believe that Boxborough pays about 15% of the overall project cost.
And I assume that they need to vote on that?
Well, they're voting on Article 1 on Tuesday.
For the school, 15% of the school, not for this project.
No, okay, so here, Boxborough is not contributing directly to this project. The school will either build a septic for about $600,000 or connect to the sewer for about $600,000. Same cost for the project as part of the building project.
Okay.
Because that's part of the building project, that $600,000, like any amount of the project, about 15% of that is Boxborough, about 85% is Acton.
So that vote happens on Article 1?
Yes. Okay. On Boxborough's Article 1 and our Article 1.
Yes, okay. I also wanted to bring to the attention of the board, the state law that prohibits requiring a sewer, and I know that we don't have that language, but I just want to read from the 963 CMR Site Standard 2. The site selected shall be chosen on the basis that it will meet the educational need, maximize the use of any available community resources, and minimize any possible adverse educational, environmental, social, or economic impact upon the community. Such adverse impact shall include, but not necessarily be limited to, the need to provide new sewers, roads, transportation facilities, etc. So I'm a little concerned that we're, pun intended, treading into murky waters, because I have looked at the Middle Fort Pond Sewer District West Acton Sewer Continuation Project information for non-West Acton residents, since I'm not in West Acton. And the question, wasn't there money from the sewer fund used for West Acton? The answer is yes. This provided a detailed cost estimate and was necessary to provide a sewer connection for the Gates Douglas School by summer 2020. So I know we're talking about hooking up to the school, and that's the rationale. That was the answer to Nancy's question, that the rationale now for phase 1 is to be able to provide this hookup to the school. And so I can't comment on the legality because I'm not an attorney or a law student, but that just makes me a little nervous, and I think that the board should be cognizant of that.
So we're certainly not requiring that the school connect. We will be there if the school wants to connect, and that'll be the language in the motion for Article 3 on Tuesday if this board chooses to go forward with this plan today. And there was another point you made. I'm forgetting what that was.
It's just that the language in this frequently asked question or information makes it seem that this project was now being done. In fact, the last question, but why is this project happening now? The West Acton Sewer Project is the result of over 15 years of planning, a recommendation of Acton's 2020 plan, and provides the Gates Douglas School Project a sewer connection by summer 2020. So it's just my only concern is that the word necessary is in the answer to this question, and also that this was one of the reasons why the project is happening now, and it seemed to be a time issue because we needed to have the sewer in order for this connection to happen in the summer of 2020. So that, to me, that is moving into the area that it could be interpreted as a requirement. And I also, this is unrelated, but I just have an objection to the use of the word recommended by Acton's 2020 plan, because I've recently been reading the Acton 2020 plan over and over and over again just to familiarize myself with the town's roadmap. So the Acton 2020 plan, the housing production plan, so I'm familiar with where we're headed as I get more involved in different committees and volunteering. And that's not my reading of the action item. It said that the action item was to consider sewering West Acton and also to consider a package wastewater treatment plant, which is a much smaller. So to say in this information sheet that it was a recommendation of the Acton 2020 plan, I think is a little misleading.
Okay, I just want to be clear again that we cannot and are not, requiring the school to hook up. We can't do that, as you say. You also mentioned that some of the design funds were used. Those are, if phase 2 goes through, the town meeting authorized last year to use monies from the Sewer Enterprise Fund for design of this district. That money is part of the total project budget, which would, if phase 2 goes through, pay back that design money into the Sewer Enterprise Fund. And finally, one of the things that and reasons why it's advantageous to hook up the school is the school may be the single biggest discharger into the ground in West Acton, right? There's 1,150 people there during the day. There are people around the school who have approached this committee and are concerned about the groundwater. Now, I am not concerned about the groundwater. The school will have a modern, good septic system, but I'm just saying that there are people, for example, on Houghton Lane, who have come to the committee and are concerned about it.
Yes?
I just want to follow up on that single largest groundwater user. There is the Environmental Protection Agency's contention that on their website, the advantages and disadvantages of sewers versus septics, and one of the advantages is that septics actually recharge the groundwater on site rather than having it go to a different part of town and be released into the river.
We don't take our groundwater from West Acton. The water district does not have a active well in West Acton. In fact, most of the water comes from South Acton, so we should put it back in South Acton.
Sahana Purohit from 13 Blueberry Path. A simple question. When, we know that the schools are, if at all this phase 1 passes, will be able to pay up to $600K. Do we have a letter of support from Village Works at this point and other businesses?
No, there have been some informal conversations, and as I mentioned earlier, Village Works would prefer that the whole project be done and that they just hook up like normal, like anybody else after phase 2. But if only phase 1 goes through, they will hook up, right? If the sewer goes by them, and we do have the situation where I said phase 2 doesn't pass, and we offer especially big businesses and maybe everyone the chance to hook up, then they will hook up.
So just a suggestion, so maybe it's a good idea to just get a letter of support from them. And to follow up on John's question too, this is again a suggestion, maybe, if it's better for us to see something up there with the numbers, what happens if phase 1, phase 2 fails, and what are the betterment fees for the rest of the people on Mass Ave and Spruce Street?
Yes, I can add to this slide what I think the betterment number is if phase 2 fails.
Christy Anderson, Main Street. How is water currently from the processed water from the wastewater treatment plant put back into the environment?
It's infiltrated into the ground right next to the plant. Most of that water eventually makes its way through the ground to the river after being processed by the ground. And some of the water, though, according to the hydrologic studies, crosses High Street and goes behind Stop and Shop and continues that way. It takes actually, they've tracked the water there for a couple of years, and some of it goes that way.
Hi, Avalajanak, Heather Hill Road. So first, I want to applaud you on creative thinking. I think creative thinking should always be applauded, and even if we're batting around ideas, I think that's important. This is a complex situation. One of the things in this motion is to have a contingency to allow the school to choose whether or not this moves forward once the entire town in aggregate votes to have a phase 1, phase 2 type structure, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so who exactly from the school makes that decision? Is that the school board or the school building committee? Who pulls the trigger, who votes, who does that?
So we would ask for the superintendent to let us know, and if the superintendent, if the process for the school district is to have the school building committee vote, that's fine. Whatever is the process within the school district.
Okay, so my question is this, in the spirit of having some creative thinking, because the motion's not put forward yet, it's still changeable, yes?
There's drafted language.
So what we're doing is, as a town, we are voting to empower the school to make the decision on behalf of what is going to be going forward with West Acton. Why don't we also add, if the entire town votes for it, let the exact people in West Acton take their own vote and see if they are willing to move it forward. Say 90% of the people say, we're going to hook up immediately. Because if they're really for this, they should be dying to hook up, right?
There isn't a provision in state law to allow subsets of people to vote.
But we're allowing one person?
No,
to have that say?
it's not a vote. It's one customer, if you will, to decide to tell us whether they'll hook up or not.
But why can't we put in a contingency then to basically say that the folks in West Acton, maybe through the representation of one person?
So phase one is not proposed to connect to everybody. It's proposed to connect to just the school. And so, to me, I would rather not go down that path which is purely hypothetical. If next year phase two doesn't pass and we end up there, then we will deal with it, right? But, and there is a small risk of a few $100,000 to the town, right? You can use the numbers and make whatever, conclusions you want from those numbers. So there is a small risk of a few $100,000 to the town.
So I guess what I'd say is I just have two words of caution. The optics of giving one party the contingency to have final say on what could be the outcome of the residents, ultimately the outcome of the residents, the optics of that aren't favorable, I would say. And the second thing is, a lot of folks that come to a town meeting like this have a passionate view on something. Those of indifference don't show up at town meeting. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone that shows up at town meeting has a passionate view on every topic that comes up. Associating the decision of the school as to whether or not this project goes forward in any phase or not basically says to the folks in West Acton, and I'd hate to see this invited because I am a huge advocate of the schools going through, if you don't want sewers, vote no on the school. And that's what could be invited, and I caution on that.
I don't see how you got there, right? This project, if this project is just for the school.
I understand that.
The first phase.
And if the school doesn't go through, and that's the first vote,
then nothing happens.
Exactly.
Except we come back for phase two, which was what would have happened anyway. So the whole purpose of this approach to the two phasing is to give us time to reduce the costs for property owners in the district. It's just to give us time. And the only reason for having phase one, which has always been the case and always been pushed ahead of everything else in this project, is to support the school, even when it would have been passed in one article. Right. It's not that the school gets a veto on anything. If they don't want this, then we won't do phase one. If they do want it...
And we'll still do phase two?
Yeah, we will come back with a proposal next year for phase two. In either case. And I tried to say that in the slides, obviously not clearly enough. So there's actually almost no difference to the phase two that we would, maybe literally no difference, to the phase two that we would propose, whether we do phase one or not. Actually, when I say, I'll go back to the almost no difference. The only difference is that the force main is included in the phase two project instead of the phase one project. Other than that, there's no difference.
Okay. I would make that incredibly clear at town meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question was somewhat related. I think people don't really understand sort of the differences between a septic system on a large project and a sewer system. Is there anyone here that can sort of talk a little bit about, the pros and cons of each, so people just know what they are?
So a septic system functions in your yard, discharges locally, and the sewer system, all the wastewater goes to a central plant to be processed and discharges there. In the case of the school, all the plumbing works in the school exactly the same in either case. The difference is to the school really are that in one part of the project, the leach field will be mounted 10 feet at one end for the leach field from the septic system. And if they hook to the sewers, they can use that land for something else. But that's the biggest viewable difference, and the fact that maybe a different, to some people, it's definitely important to some people on Houghton Lane, that the school will be a very large discharger of wastewater into the ground in West Acton.
Thank you.
If I could just add to that, there are other differences. First of all, John Peterson is on the school committee, so I can't speak to him. It appears the school committee has decided not to recommend or not recommend this article, if that's true. But there are differences. The other things are costs. Water, sewer fees, the schools would incur, which would, is my understanding from the superintendent, is about $15,000 a year based on estimates from the junior high and Parker Damon buildings that are already on the sewers. The water use, that cost is avoided if they have a septic system. There are other costs for septic systems, maintenance. Big cost would be, the effective life of the system, say it's 40 years, might have to be replaced after a period of time. Sewers don't have that problem. There may be environmental debates. I mean, the building committee will have a debate about the pros and cons of this, of hooking up or not hooking up, assuming this passes and that's available to the schools. So there are differences of opinion, and those will be worked out if the schools and voted on if the schools get the opportunity to hook up.
Sorry. Nancy Waters, 622 Mass Ave again. This is a question, point of order question for Madam Chairwoman. Are we still in a question phase here? It seems like sort of we're evolving into arguments. And do you plan to take arguments or statements, and should I hold off on that or do it now?
Well, we're going to close the comment period if you have something to say.
Okay.
What?
You said questions only earlier.
I think the confusion was you had said this was a question period.
Oh, sorry.
So I guess there would be board comments and citizen comments.
That was my question. Are you open? We open for citizen comments now? Okay. It seems like from the very beginning, this has been a project in search of a rationale. The rationale keeps changing. It seems like the West Acton Sewer Advisory Action Committee came up with a plan, and the forums that they held were not opportunities to solicit public input, but they were more like sales shows. No public input changed the plan, only the way it was sold to the community, which I have to say was not very effectively. There were so many things about the process that are questionable, including the fact, and I'm not sure, I don't think the community knows this because it's something we've just been discussing in the last few days. Renters were never informed about this. There are 70 renters on this. I was told, well, the town doesn't have their names. We've informed them by knocking on their doors. The entire community was never invited into the forums, only West Acton. It would have been easy to do a reverse 911 call to the entire community of Acton, who will be expected to vote on this and pay for parts of it, and let them into this process. That never happened. What's happening here today and over the next 4 days, 2 of which include weekend days, is incredibly rushed. I agree with Al that you're applying some creative thinking and you're trying to address real concerns in the community, and I applaud you for that. But I think you need more time to go back to the beginning. What I would recommend, and these are not all my ideas, I have got them from some people who have been in this process for a lot longer and who have done tremendous research and devoted tremendous time, and I believe going forward would be willing to continue to contribute if their contributions were seen as welcome. 1, the Board of Selectmen functions as the Board of Sewer Commissioners. This is a lot of work. You are all already really busy. And as we are seeing here today, there's an opportunity for conflict between different projects. So we humbly suggest that you empower, I'm not sure the appropriate word, a separate board of sewer commissioners who would report to you. 2, do a comprehensive, statistically significant study of what is happening with Acton's septic tank systems. My understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that since Title V went into effect, every Title V inspection and every septic replacement is kept track of at Town Hall. Let's find out what it really costs to replace a septic tank in Acton, possibly extend that to other towns in the area with similar hydrogeologic profiles, such as Boxborough, Littleton, etc. Then you would have a comprehensive, statistically significant understanding of how often the systems really fail and what they really cost to replace. From there, you could develop a plan about what a fair betterment might be. Embark on a septic education program. When I moved here, it was my first experience with a septic system. I don't recall, I have received a lot of really helpful educational information from the Water District about water usage, drinking water, etc. I don't recall that I've ever received anything from the town about how to take care of my septic system. I went online to find out. Undertake a new CWRMP, and let the authors be the researchers, the authors be an entity that has no skin in the game. It is a conflict of interest for Woodward and Curran to tell us what we should be doing when they stand to make millions or lose millions from our decision. Come up with a 21st century, innovative, creative plan that incorporates the entire community. Look at other environmental aspects beyond clean water, which is really important, but take into consideration carbon impacts and other concerns. I can't figure out, and nobody here is responsible for that, but I cannot figure out why in 2019 we're not talking about gray water recovery systems and composting toilets. So we need to look out there at what is going on innovatively and creatively. Littleton has a smart sewer project that will have a lower carbon footprint and recharge groundwater. Buzzards Bay and Falmouth are looking at advanced septic systems that take better care of nitrogen. We need to be taking these things into consideration. Finally, bring everyone into the process. Bring all the neighborhoods into the process and come up with a plan that doesn't just look at one neighborhood now and then 14 years later we'll look at another one, but that identifies when, if we go with sewers, when each neighborhood that's going to be included would be included and start projecting out those costs. Finally, write a new bylaw in which you guarantee, if we go with betterments, that those betterments will actually balance out so that you're getting something better than you would get if you replaced your septic system, and that you're not diminishing your chance of selling your house, and also that takes into consideration the sunk, pun intended, sunk costs of those people who have put in new septic systems recently. The other people that I've been working on this have even more ideas, and they're really good ones. I would urge you to listen to them, but you can't put together something that's going to satisfy all your real and genuine goals in 4 days. Thank you.
So So I want to say two things. First of all, the committee took input from anyone who wanted to take it, and we changed the project for input. We changed the extent of the project and other things about the project based on input. We had many forums which we advertised through the entire town. And secondly, the point of this phasing is to give us more time to assess the things that Nancy mentioned.
Hi, Christy Anderson, Main Street. I would like you to seriously consider pushing off Phase 2. I moved out to West Acton because it was affordable for me, a town with good schools. I was not working at the time. We got the smallest house we could to get into town. I now rent that out. I keep it market rate affordable. And I can tell you right now, I pulled up a map, the West Acton build-out map. There are 46 units right along Spruce, Main Street, Arlington Street, and down a little bit that cost under $500,000. These are just listed as the units for sale, their estimated sales value. This isn't including a few of the apartment buildings that are there. If the top of that range is $489,000, the betterment, each betterment for any size building in the district is set as $2,700 a year betterment charge, no matter the size. So if you have 3+ bedrooms in your house, no matter how small it is, you'll pay $2,700 extra dollars. At the top of the price range I have in here for these houses is $486,000 house. Compared to last year's taxes, that a 32% increase for them by adding the $2,700 a year. Down in my house, which is one of the smallest ones, it only has 2 bedrooms, so it's a 2/3 betterment. That's a betterment of $1,800, also a 43% increase for my renters. At that point, the price is well outside of the range of being affordable for people in the town who are below, or some of them well below the median income. Part of what we want here is to have a vibrant village center of small, compact houses. If we make them all be super expensive houses, we're going to drive out any of socioeconomic diversity that we have here. I think that's a real risk with this project.
Just a question, did you say not go forward with Phase 2 or Phase 1?
I would like you to put off Phase 2 with the idea that maybe some way can be made to make it more affordable.
So actually, that's the point.
I understand. I'm just speaking in support of it.
The point of delaying Phase 2 is to just reassess this. So you're supporting this?
I'm supporting pushing off.
Understood.
To Phase 2, and I'm happy to give out any of the information you would like, showing how unaffordable this is for everyone below the median income in that area.
Thank you.
So, Joanne Bissetta, I'm a West Acton resident. I've been on the sewer committee and also on the Board of Health. Been participating in this process for a little over a year when we started meeting. And I just want to get back to why this committee was started. And part of it was, again, a bit of timing. West Acton was always considered to be sewered at some point. When my neighbor moved in on the early 2000s, the realtor said sewers are arriving at any day. So it's been in the works, so to speak. And I think it's correct in the FAQ that the school project accelerated the process. So it seemed like an opportunity to address the school issue and then get the sewers in West Acton. I want to talk about septic systems. There's different hydrology in West Acton. I have a groundwater level of 3 feet. I have a mounted system. My neighbor has a mounted system. My across the street neighbor has a variance. But there are also some people who can actually build a compliant septic system. Wearing my Board of Health hat on, it's difficult in a lot, but not all, of the residential properties in West Acton to build a compliant septic system. So on the Board of Health, we issue a lot of variances for a variety of things. We always issue variances because we can't not have an operating septic system. So just in general, sewers in a lot, but not all, of West Acton in the different parcels would benefit. There's a lot of small lots, and it would be very helpful. I voted last night in support of bifurcating the project. I think we heard in those public forums, and as a bettered person, I would like to address the inequity of how the town betters sewer customers. So that's one reason why I voted for that. And I think, if we look at bylaw changes, we look at potential other funding mechanisms, we can then come back with a more thoughtful and palatable, and, hopefully it would, be less of a betterment for phase 2. Thank you.
Chair, can I just ask you one question, please? Can you just articulate why the Board of Health voted to support the original project? I mean, was it because of all the variances you were having to grant?
Yes,
septics?
because of the overall environmental benefit. You'll hear from folks, we don't have a water quality issue, which is true, but we also don't test for a lot of things. And then I'm a planner by trade, and wearing my planner's hat on, this is why you do water plans, to avoid problems down the road. That's why the state, I believe, required this plan to be developed 20 years ago. But ultimately, yes, the Board of Health, I believe, was unanimous in the vote.
Okay, and I understand you test Fort Pond Brook for E. coli, which is not elevated, is
Correct.
my understanding.
Correct.
There's also been some debate or differences of opinion about nitrate levels. I'm told that the town doesn't test for nitrate in the groundwater itself. The opponents of this project have said that nitrate levels are not elevated. Somebody does testing. Do you know anything about that?
When I asked the health director, I was told that the town hasn't been testing for nitrates for a while. So.
Okay, thanks very much.
Hi, Lauren Rosenzweig Morton, 26 Marshall Path. I empathize with people that think that sewers is going to make the town grow and all of these things. My own personal reason for wanting sewers in areas and for wanting this phase 1 to go forward and waiting on the rest is that it takes a long time to understand the advantages. And for me, the advantage in South Acton, and why I voted for it in South Acton, was the historic properties. The historic properties and the little businesses in South Acton were deteriorating, and I really felt it was very, very important to have systems in there that would help those. And it's the same situation in West Acton. I'm worried about the different buildings that are historic and have very, very small lots and not very many septic options. What makes the village charming is those buildings. And, that's one of the reasons. There's also lovely, lovely homes that I think if they don't have an option, will start deteriorating and not having the ability to maintain their properties. So that's the reason I'm in favor. So I hope we go ahead with phase 1 and put, however long it takes for phase 2 to really have the thorough discussion and suggestions that Ms. Waters and others are sharing with you today. Thank you.
Sahana Purohit from 13 Blueberry Path. Actually, I just want to look at it, first of all, thank you for coming up with, a good plan compared to what was being offered earlier. And thanks to my committee member who actually, sent the email out to get us to thinking in the right direction. So having said that, I'm just going to go back to the numbers, what you have up there. So what we are seeing right now is really what we are left with is about $800,000 for the town, and in that probably we might have more businesses hooking up to the sewer lines if phase 1 goes through. So there is really no downside to this. All I can see is, we are giving our businesses more opportunities to grow, which is what we have been planning to do for a very long time. And talking about, I didn't see the handout, but whatever was said earlier about Acton 2020, suggesting that the sewer lines go in, it was a suggestion. It was not something that had to be done, but definitely what we had concluded was vibrant village centers, and this is what we are talking about. If there is no parking, park elsewhere. The whole idea is to walk around to these businesses and have a mixed use area in there. So this is what we had talked about earlier, and this is a good thing. If, like everybody else suggested, it gives us a lot of time for phase 2. We can actually look about other ways of getting the project done in a minimal downside to the residents involved in the West Acton Village. And so I would suggest that the board consider voting yes for phase 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ann Chang, I live in South Acton, where we will never get sewers, unfortunately. I'm also on the Economic Development Committee, and I've always considered the first part of this project to be for economic development of West Acton, which is desperately needed. And I think that phase 1, when it passes, and when you allow it to go forward in the 2-phase thing, will be paid for by, if phase 2 doesn't pass, will be paid for by the privilege fees of the other commercial entities in West Acton that desperately need sewers, because several of them don't have any place to go. If their septic tanks were to fail right now, they have no place to go. There is no room for them to put septics in, and several of them, one in particular, has cesspools which, if they lived in any other town, would be banned. I also like to say Town Hall does not keep costs of the replacement systems unless the people come and say, oh my God, it's costing me $35,000 to put in my new system, which if I had had sewers when South Acton went in, it would only cost me $13,000. So the people who want to do the statistics for the cost of sewers have to go and ask the owners how much they did, because the town doesn't keep that information. The CWRMP, on which I also served, looked at the entire town. We did not do sewers for different parts of the town. We did do other kinds of plans for the septic systems in those sections of town where the soils are poor. But the CWRMP, even though some people think it was rigged because Woodard and Kern did it, it had to go through a whole process of analyses by the DEP, so I can't imagine why anyone would think it's rigged. The other thing is, I really do think that the project should go forward in the phase system, because that's what it was going to be in the beginning anyhow. So I hope that you go forward on whatever day it is, the 10th, and have the article be for phase 1.
Me again. In the CWRMP phase 2 from 2004, there are other neighborhoods that have, as best I can tell from a very casual table here, it's not particularly scientific, other neighborhoods are ranked higher than West Acton in terms of their hydrogeologic need. For example, there's high groundwater listed in Indian Village, mounded systems needed. That's not something that's listed for West Acton, even though it's been a recent claim. And then there are lots of other, because Acton is essentially a swamp with a few ridges in between, there are lots of other neighborhoods that are listed for wetlands and wetland buffers. It's got small lots, but you would have to do an actual study of those small lots to see whether they have affected, pardon me, my computer just went off, to see whether they have affected the ability of people to put in septic tanks. Lauren wrote about the beautiful houses in West Acton. I have one of them. Mine's small, but it's lovely, and those are my neighbors, and they don't want it. They care about their beautiful ancient houses. Some of them have just put in new septic tanks, and they didn't have any trouble. Spencer Tuthill was higher priority than we are for environmental reasons, and it failed there 10 years ago because they didn't want it and it was too expensive. So now you've gone to a lower environmental priority neighborhood, and your non-environmental reasons for this are regulatory pressure to address the school, which doesn't seem to...
That's not a priority.
Well, that's what's listed in the CWRMP. And the warrant says that the reason we're doing this is because of the CWRMP.
The regulatory pressure for the school was for the school campus, not for the twin school.
Okay, which is in Kelly Corner, not West Acton Center, so that's a mistake on this very non-scientific table. The other reason is that it's a village center. It doesn't really, I don't see the connection there. And the other reason is town-planned economic development. And what we are telling you is that I am literally the West Acton Village's best customer. If you want to come to my house, I'll show you everything I bought at Tables to Teapots. We have a vibrant town center. I checked today on my way here, we have one vacancy on Mass Ave. We have storefronts on Spruce Street that have the no sewer sign up. We have spoken, I know who some of these businesses are that want this, but I also know the ones that don't want it. And many of them are renters. If their rents go up, you will drive them out.
The point of this is to address the cost. That's why we're proposing this. That's the whole thing.
But the renters don't even want it from a septic standpoint. They don't.
The renters don't know, right? If the renters know the costs, but the renters don't know where the water goes. So, and the point of this is to address the cost, as you just mentioned. That's the whole point of the phasing. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. Otherwise, we just move to do the whole project.
All right, I applaud you for attempting to address the concerns of renters. But I still don't know where this economic growth for West Acton is going to come from. If the businesses there are doing well, and there's no vacancies, and there's no empty space, where's the growth going to come from?
The majority of businesses in West Acton support this project, and
the majority. Okay.
They've come to the meetings, and actually many people in the district support this. And I understand you don't, and there are other people who don't, and that's fine. But a lot of people do as well.
Okay.
It's mixed.
When you say the majority, you have taken a survey, and you know that 51% of every business owner in West Acton supports this?
Most of the businesses have been to a forum and spoken in favor.
Most of the business owners or the property owners?
Could we finish your comment, please?
Okay. This remains a project in search of a rationale. With 4 days to go, there's no time for everybody to look this over and understand it and see it, and including it on the warrant on Tuesday night is just going to make that evening much more challenging for everyone. Thank you.
Nancy Tavernier. I support this proposal. I compliment David on his courage. Like I said at the last forum, this is deja vu all over again. I began my public service in the town in 1984, working on the issues of sewers for South Acton. And yes, ultimately we got 3 positive votes, but we also had 2 or 3 negative votes, one of which lost by 1 vote short of 2/3. So I've been there, I've heard these comments. They're the same, just change the name to South Acton. The difference with the South Acton process was that we had raw sewage running in the street. So it was pretty easy to point to that and say, look, there's a problem, and this is the solution. These were in places in South Acton where you could not replace a septic system without doing a tight tank. We also had raw sewage running down into Kelly's Corner that the school kids were walking through. But be that as it may, it eventually passed, and we got the 3 votes, and we got the sewers built. And I hope that the same can happen for West Acton. I'm one of those who didn't think my septic system had any problem whatsoever. I have a 65-year-old system. We said this year maybe we better do a Title V test. Guess what? It failed. And we had no indication that it was in failure. It was in failure because the cesspool was in groundwater. Simple. You can't tell me if you haven't done a Title V test that your system is fine. And so last month, we put in a brand new system. When all was said and done, $33,000 comes out of our pocket. We don't get to pay it over 30 years. The most important thing that David used was the word community. That's what finally got the sewers in South Acton, when enough people decided to vote yes. People who were never going to be sewered, like Ann, and finally realized, in the interest of community, let's vote for this. And I have the same philosophy for West Acton. I live in West Acton, have for 46 years. And the point there is, we're all in this together. We want to make the town environmentally safe. We want the village to be vibrant. We do it because we care as a community. I haven't had kids in the school system in 20 years, and it would never occur to me to not support the new school, not support the school budget, or anything else they ask for. I say, please, give us a chance, vote for this phase 1, and then let us all work together, and come up with ways to reduce the betterment, which is something we should have done in South Acton, but we just couldn't figure it out. So let us do that, support this proposal.
Alyssa Nickel, I live at 76 School Street, and I can't really say whether to ask you to support this new motion to bifurcate this project into 2 phases or not, but I do have some concerns. It's my understanding that the pumping and maintenance for the schools, if they were on septic, which they already have a plan approved, would be about $1,000 a year, as opposed to $15,000 a year for the sewer fees. So $14,000 a year is a very expensive parking lot. And I know that perhaps there could be some other student use, because I heard the superintendent at the League of Women Voters say student use or parking lot would be something that they could do. So that's one concern. I live in South Acton Village. They call it South Acton Village, but we don't really have a village. I bought my house in 2001, so we came in after the vote for sewers. When the property owners that sold us the house had the Title V inspection, it had failed, so we had no choice but to hook up to sewers. But looking at the South Acton Village Plan from 1994, sewers were claimed to be the single key to a revitalization of the village. And Exchange Hall got painted because of CPA funds. The bridge was fixed because of the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. There were several businesses that left, and I can't tell you that they left because their sewer betterment cost forced them out of business, but what I can tell you is that sitting in their place right now are apartments and condominiums, and we keep adding more housing, more residential development, more condos and apartments, and yet our property taxes keep going up. My property taxes, I've only been here 18 years, have doubled. And I think that something that has to do with that, I didn't study economics, but you lose the commercial tax base and you replace it with residential that puts a burden on our infrastructure. I don't think that that's good business. It's not good government. It's not good economics. It's not fiscally responsible. Just like a lot of other people here, I go to West Acton Village at least weekly, but usually more than once a week, to eat in the restaurants and cafes, to buy things in the shop. I have to go to West Acton Village to do this because I don't have a village in South Acton that I can walk to businesses. We have a tattoo parlor, we have a cabinet maker, we have a jiu-jitsu school, and an auto body shop, which I take my car to when it needs to be fixed. But I would hate to see the same thing happen in West Acton Village. And even if the town and the sewer committee says that it's vital to have sewers to support this vibrant, walkable village center, the same thing was said in South Acton, and it just didn't play out. In fact, businesses left, and it's less vibrant than it was.
Jean Panetta, I own Acton Realty Trust, which is where Sal's Auto and Truck Repair is located. Our estimate for the sewer betterment fee is approximately $800,000, which is about what, if I've understood these things correctly, what we may be asking the town to pay for phase one as an overall consensus. Doesn't seem very fair to me. But I've heard numerous times that the businesses are all for having sewer, and that there's nobody that's really against it, that everybody, all the businesses in West Acton are for it. We've never been asked if we were for sewer. I know of other ones that haven't been asked either. Has anybody gone out and asked these businesses, or have you only heard from the ones that are interested in going forward for the sewers? I feel that going forward with the sewers is going to change West Acton forever, and I don't think it's going to be for a good thing. It's bad enough now that you can turn around on almost every corner and find that houses are being built in people's backyards and side yards, and that's without sewer. You're going to get rid of a lot of the small businesses that are in Acton, and it is going to end up with housing, which is going to add to the schools and the fire department and the police, not to mention the traffic and the water. The fact that there hasn't been an analysis done of what could possibly end up in West Acton at this point in time, in this day and age, amazes me. I am sure that in 1994, they weren't expecting people's houses in their backyards. I mean, it's sad. You look at Pearl Street and Central Street, where there was one single-family house. There's now 2 more added on. That's one example. Look down on Windsor Ave at the intersection of Central Street. There's at least one other house going in there. If you go further down Willow Street by Summer Street, look in people's backyards right after the intersection, and there's houses there. This is without sewer. I'm sorry?
They don't have sewers.
I realize that, and that's without sewerage. Has anybody looked to see how many additional units could be put into these single-family residents that are going to be assessed $39,000.
So in South Acton District, which is about 10 times the size of the proposed West Acton District, since the sewers were put in, 147 housing units have been added in the, 17 years?
How many businesses?
No businesses, really.
How many businesses were lost?
Except in Kelly's Corner, and that I'm not sure of. The businesses that were lost were not retail businesses, right? The only business that was lost that was a retail business was the foreign car, School Street Garage. There was on my street, right, on High Street where I live, there was an empty garage that people call one of these failed businesses. I didn't even realize that it was a business, and I can easily walk there, and I walk by it all the time. It wasn't a business, it was an abandoned garage. And then the third business that people refer to was a storage facility that was replaced with some condos, and at the train station, right down Railroad Street. And frankly, I think the condos are a considerable improvement. And this is my neighborhood, right? So the condos are much nicer looking than was the storage facility. So no businesses were lost, no businesses were gained right in South Acton Village.
There used to be, and I can't think of the name of it right now, going down Maple Street, where Stowe Street veers off on the right-hand side there was a business in there, and I believe that the train station's there now. I think they did some kinds of forms.
Yes, so yeah, we bought that property.
Mm-hmm.
The town bought that property.
They're no longer in business.
Well, the man got to be 85 years old.
Can we stop the dialogue? We have to discuss among ourselves. If you could finish your statement.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All in all, I don't know whether sewers are good for Acton or not. I think that the way that they are proposing it at this point in time is very unfair, both to the businesses and to some of the homeowners, maybe not all. I think that Acton maybe needs to take a step back and look at the whole overall thing rather than to try to hurry up and pass it to get it through. The rush seems to be for the schools. The school does not need the sewers in order to get built. They do have a septic system plan that is in place. And I also question what South Acton betterments were compared to what West Acton betterments are proposed to be for percentage-wise. For some reason, I want to say I think it's 3 times the amount. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for your contribution. David.
Do you want me to make a motion now, or do we want to make other remarks now?
I hope we get, everyone's discussed. I think we should have an opportunity to discuss it, including Dean Charter, who's on the phone. So let's do that first.
Yes. If you can repeat the motion for me when that comes up, because it's a little scratchy.
Okay, we haven't made a motion yet. Do we want to make some comments first?
Well, I think we should all have an opportunity, Dean included, to comment on what's before us.
Well, why don't we move and then have discussion about the motion? I mean, I think that's...
Well, I think, it's complicated. I mean, part of...
we've been here long enough. I don't care. I mean, frankly,
Okay.
usually the normal procedure is make a motion, discuss the motion, then vote on the motion. But if you want to discuss it before that, that's fine. We do that a lot.
Let's do
so
that.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
let's do that.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I agree with David. We have like 3 options before the Selectmen today. We can go forward with Article 3 as we recommended it in a vote of 4-0-1 on November 18th. We can offer the so-called Phase 1 amendment, or we could change our recommendation of November 18th to take no action. Now, I think going forward with the article, arguably the whole article, that's Phase 1, Phase 2, arguably it does allow citizens to have a discussion and to register their opinions. It's my opinion that that article faces certain defeat on Tuesday night. You'll never muster 2/3, and it may go down decisively. And that would be unfortunate because that would end the discussion of sewers for some time. I don't think anybody's going to pick it up after that. The amendment, I have a number of concerns about that. That's the amendment to allow for the twin school sewer hookup. I had a conversation Wednesday morning with Mary Brolin, who is the head of the 19-member school building committee and has been at this for a number of years. I asked her this question: is it critical to the project to have the sewer hookup? Her response was no. She said the school is designed for a septic system as the Mass School Building Association required. The school building committee is prepared to go forward with the septic. She acknowledged that there's a slight advantage to sewers over septic, and one slight advantage would be there's more field space for the kids. If the amendment would be approved, it was Mary's sense that the school building committee, which I don't think has the final say on this, would lean towards saying yes to sewers. But the overriding message in this is that there's no emergency, there's no exigent circumstance that says, God, we must have these sewers. If we don't have these sewers, we can't go forward with the project. I still have some concerns in light of David's answer to the question that I said, if we have phase one, if that's approved, if phase one gets approved, given the town bylaw as it exists, and if phase two should fail, what would be the effect on betterments in the people who are in the phase one district? Perhaps we might have a better answer on Monday night, assuming we go forward. I don't want to see a huge cost, a huge betterment cost to those people who would be in the limited hookup district. I was really concerned, and this addresses the third option, should we just take no action on Article 3? The sewer article, although we've been talking sewers in West Acton since the 1970s, as we've been talking the North Acton Fire Station since the 1970s, I think the sewer article came on before us much, much too fast. The design and engineering funds were appropriated at town meeting 2019. We could contrast that to the North Acton Fire Station, which is a much simpler project, and those design funds were appropriated in town meeting 2018. And we did have to hustle a little bit to get this ready for next week. I was particularly concerned over the last couple of weeks that there was no outreach to the West Acton community. There was no survey done as to whether the people who would be in the district really wanted sewers. I mean, it seemed like a similar mistake to what was made 10 years ago with Spencer, Tuttle, Flint, where there was no polling of the people in the district. Do you want sewers in the first instance? And what it's all struck me as is it's a few people telling many what's right for them and what's good for them and what they must have. But it sounds like the sewer committee has had a come to Jesus moment and say, oh my God, at the 11th hour, we've really kind of boxed this. We really needed more outreach. We should have, talked to the community in a more meaningful, way about it. On that same line, people from outside West Acton are telling them, we want to see a vibrant business district in West Acton Village. We have our ideas, and it's almost like we want to impose this on other people. You have a very vibrant business district. It took a long time and a lot of courage on Matt Rosenfeld's part to stay with his Village Works project. That's what's transformed it and made it a very vibrant area. We have little shops. The people in the village like those shops. Those shops may not wash in Newton or Brookline, but they wash in West Acton Village. They're particular to the village. We got to stop telling people in West Acton what they want. We've got to be cognizant of the scale, the size of West Acton Village. It can only take so much. It's not a restaurant mecca. If we want to have restaurants, the Kmart parcel would be a wonderful place for a restaurant, designation. And most of the people who talk about restaurants don't really understand the difficulties of restaurants. 90% of restaurants, go out of business or change hands within 1 year for a range of reasons, poor business planning, and there's just not the market for it. So if we go to phase 2, let's really listen to the Nancy Waters and other people, who came forward, with their thoughts on the village that they really care about so much. But most importantly, if we want to go forward with sewers, we've really got to change the culture as to how sewers are paid for. And that's just not a small committee. That's a town-wide effort. We've had a terrible, short-sighted history in this town about sewers. We've had opportunities in the 60s and 80s where there was abundance of federal funds available that would have paid for 90% of the sewers. We took the view, oh no, it'll promote growth. Well, the growth came anyway. And what finally moved the dial on sewers was the dire situation in South Acton neighborhoods where systems failed, houses would have to be condemned, there was sewage in the street. But the trade-off for doing that, was not the largesse of the town as a whole. The trade-off was the people in the village had to pay for their betterments, 100%, with very little money coming in from the outside. That's been our model. And, I really felt for people, in the district who said, I am being assessed a betterment for something I don't need and I don't want. And there was a general response to that, it's good for the whole town, so suck it up, Buttercup. You got to keep in mind...
Frankly, John, that is really unfair. No one ever, please don't put words in anybody's mouth. No one said suck it up, Buttercup. At all?
Well,
no one ignored the feedback we got. I think your remarks here are actually quite abusive. And,
David, we've been here a long time and we need to...
It's fine that you have your opinion, but it's not fair to impugn someone else's motivations and to say that we were telling people to suck it up or ignore their responses.
Go on.
All right.
I think we've heard from you for quite some time on this. We've heard from your committee from quite some time on this. I've heard from a lot of people in the district about their views on the project and people from outside the district. You have to realize when you're in this town, yes, it's an affluent community, but by and large, people at all ages have limited amounts of discretionary income.
Well, that's what I said here.
Hold it. I let you talk all morning on this, okay? Stop it.
David, just...
people at all levels, preschool parents have huge daycare costs. Older parents have college costs. Seniors live on fixed incomes. Money is tight. And I'll say again, I think the committee, by and large, was very, very cold to those concerns. Now, I don't want to put Peter Light on the spot because I don't know whether you're the ultimate decision maker in this. And I know it's tricky. We need that twin school. I don't want to add any pressure about whether you want sewers or you don't want sewers. Mary Brolin made her position, very clear as to where she sees her 19-member committee go. If if it would, my personal view is we're trying to do a lot in 1 week, to resurrect a project that came on too fast. We have a town meeting. My personal feeling would be to just pull the article. People however, want to have the discussion. So I would vote in favor of your amendment to bring that forward and let the town have a discussion about phase 1 only. That's where I come out.
Peter?
The new school building has been a priority to be as environmentally friendly as possible. Someone mentioned gray water. Just for point of information for people, the new school building will be using roof runoff and gray water for non-sanitary purposes. So this is a good thing. The town certainly has very strong priority for sustainability in the future. I think my biggest concern has been the costs of the project. Particularly, we've gotten comments from places like the West Acton Baptist Church that's concerned that the betterments might affect their ability to run certain programs out of there. On the other hand, I'm in South Acton. We're members of the South Acton Congregational Church. The sewers helped the South Acton Congregational Church. We were able to put in a daycare program in the basement, which we would not have been allowed to do with just a septic system. And other programs have helped the church actually thrive since sewers came in. So the businesses, West Acton already has a thriving business district, which South Acton never did. We'll see what happens with that stretch of land between the School Street Garage and the Civil Defense Building, but one possibility is there might be a Village Works type of project that could be built there because sewers run down School Street. So John mentions the Village Works as the real draw for West Acton and bringing a lot of life back to West Acton. The owner of Village Works has written us and said he supports the sewers. And the cost of him maintaining a septic system are so excessive that he's willing to accept the betterment cost for the new sewer district. So to me, one of the reasons that this project was kind of accelerated was because of the schools. You do say it is true that the school project has been completely approved with a septic system on it. But without moving forward with phase 1, the schools would have no option. They would have to build the septic system. And we're looking at the next 50 to 100 years. What's going to happen with septic systems in West Acton? Will it wind up like South Acton? Will it wind up like Kelly's Corner with sewage running in the road? And at that point, will sewers have to be built? That's what I'm concerned about. In my understanding, and I suppose there's debate back and forth about this, sewers are the least environmentally friendly way to dispose of wastewater. Septic treatment plants are a better alternative. So from an environmental perspective, I support...
I think you said that backwards.
What? Sewer treatment plants are more environmentally friendly than septic systems. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Sewer treatment plants discharge water that is as clean as drinking water. So they take all the nitrates and phosphates out of the water. So anyway, I support phase 1. Give the schools the opportunity to decide whether septic is a better alternative than having sewers. If they decide not to hook up, we go forward with re-looking at the sewer district. It also, in my view, gives us the time to explore all these other options that have been recommended in terms of changing the way betterments are paid for or other alternatives that might be discussed to better the project. So I'm in favor of phase one.
Dean?
Yes, yeah, it's been a good discussion. I will agree with Peter. I think that we should proceed with the phase one and bring that to town meeting next week.
Thanks. Well, I've been a selectman for many years, and I've never had to act as a sewer commissioner, so I look forward.
We set the rate.
And I would be in favor of going forward with phase one.
So I would move that we put forward a motion next Tuesday for phase one of this project.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
It has to be a roll call vote.
Oh, yeah.
I just had one question first. Would the phase one vote be a simple majority, or would the phase one vote be a simple majority of 2/3?
It's a 2/3 vote because it involves borrowing.
Okay.
Call the roll.
Okay. Mr. Charter.
He's doing a roll call vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Charter.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Berry.
Aye.
Ms. Gardner.
Aye.
Mr. Benson. Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you all for coming. We'll see you
You want to call the motion to adjourn?
Tuesday night. Is there a
I'll second the motion to adjourn.
motion made and seconded to adjourn? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.